So good evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Julia Ellergott, and I am part of the Defend Dignity leadership team, and will be your host this evening. Reveal webinars focus on understanding our pornified culture and providing you with resources to navigate its negative effects. This is the last webinar of 4 that we have hosted, and so thank you for joining us tonight, or for maybe all of them that you have come. Just as a sidebar, if we do have technical issues of any kind, you received an email yesterday that gave you all the information pertaining to this webinar. You would just need to go back to that link and then link back into the Zoom meeting again. So we haven't had any technical difficulty previously, and we're trusting you won't this evening either. At the bottom of your screen, you will see a little box and it says chat, and that opens the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. So watch that throughout the evening for links that will be posted as I mention them. And remember that at the end of each webinar, we do record it. And so tomorrow, late in the day, you should receive the link to be able to watch this webinar for 30 days for free. So just so that you know that as well. Before we get too much further, Annie, who is our backup tech gal, she's going to throw up a poll here on the screen. And what we'd like to do is to say, have you attended a Reveal event before? Great, just to see where you all are from and what that's been like. Great, so some of you have been, some of you haven't. This is much better than the US election. We're getting the results in much quicker. All right, great, thank you. Thank you for participating in that poll. Please use that chat function that is on the bottom of your screen, which then brings up the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen if you would like to communicate with us about anything this evening, if you have any questions or concerns. So yeah, please make sure to use that. Defend Dignity does work to end all sexual exploitation in Canada, and that we believe that pornography in itself is also a form of sexual exploitation. It's a huge influencer in our culture, and it fuels the demand for sexual exploitation. And so we want to be proactive in having these webinars so that we can start to work towards ending that sexual exploitation and having a healthy society that we live in. In the email that you received yesterday, you would have received a link to a page that would be full of information. It has a bio and picture of Michael, who is our presenter this evening. There is also a discount code to Covenant Eyes. Covenant Eyes is an accountability software that's great to use as a family, or you can use with your friends. And Covenant Eyes has graciously given us a 30-day free trial. So if you've attended this webinar, you get a 30-day free trial. You'll see more information there in that chat that Annie has posted. So we really encourage you to make use of that. Covenant Eyes is a great accountability software. We have the Q&A for the Zoom webinar disabled. What we're using is the app, and you would have seen a link in your email. So if you could grab your phone, and if you could go click on that email that you received yesterday, and it will say, here's the link. If you click that link, it takes you to the app Slido. And that's where our Q&A is going to be. Now, the great part about the Slido Q&A function is that it's anonymous, where you can change your name. You can also upvote questions. So if you see a question, you're thinking, oh, I really want to make sure that Michael answers it, just click the up finger and it will get you that voted up. And then I will be sure to notice that and make sure that that question has been answered. We have wanted to make these Reveal webinars free so that it's accessible to everyone. But if you have the ability to donate, we'd really appreciate just a little bit to help us cover the cost, and the link to be able to donate is there in that chat box as well. And we also have some good resources on defenddignity.ca. This is one of them, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. It's how to talk to your kids about pornography. Really easy, has some great pictures and just a great tool to use as parents. And that's on our defenddignity.ca website under resources. So if you want more, there's lots there that you can choose from. I also want to give a big shout out to Annie. She is our admin assistant for Defend Dignity, and she has done an amazing job these last 4 sessions of our webinars. She is the one who manages all the stuff behind the scenes and the practice. runs that we've done. And so Annie, big shout out to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all the hard work that you have put into and for being willing to commit yourself to 4 Thursday evenings in a row to make it happen. So thanks to Annie. Before I introduce Michael, we have another quick poll that if you could answer that, that would be great. And it's, how did you hear about Reveal? It's always good for us to know, how do people know about our events? So if you could answer that as well, that would be great. Thank you. I see many of you responding, which is awesome. And in lots of the different ways you've heard about us. Great. Thank you. So now it is my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker this evening, Michael Browning. Michael is a registered psychotherapist with the College of Registered Psychotherapists of Ontario. He has 2 graduate degrees, a master's in divinity of pastoral theology and a master's in arts and counseling and spirituality. He has degrees from Carleton, from the Toronto School of Theology in the University of Toronto, and from the University of Ottawa and St. Paul University. So Michael comes very well educated with a good depth of knowledge for us. He has also specialized training in individual, couple, and group therapy. He is also a certified sex addiction therapist, which he earned with the International Institute of Trauma and Addiction Professionals. He and his beautiful bride, Miriam, and their 3 children reside in Ottawa. Michael is also the owner and clinical director of the Whitestone Clinic for Counseling and Psychotherapy in Ottawa. This clinic is the first of its kind in the National Capital Region to offer specialty for direct treatment for sex addiction, including partner support, and that treatment comes from certified sex addiction therapists. So that's a very special piece of what Michael does. So thank you, Michael, for joining us. We're looking forward to the wisdom that you have to share with us this evening.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking time to be here. I want to just start off by showing my appreciation for all of you for dedicating the time to actually maybe attend the other sessions as well as this one. And we're going to have lots of time for questions at the end, but please put them into the Slido as we go along if a question comes up for you, and we will get to them. So the first thing, just to, I'm going to put on my share screen here so you guys can see the presentation as we go along. There we go. So a couple things. I just got a certification for multiple addictions. So I CSAT is now a CMAT because it involves other addictions. But basically this presentation is going to be one through the perspective of a therapist. So it's going to be therapy centric, help you understand what a therapeutic journey would look like for you. And by you, I'm going to be clear, it's both the individual with the addiction, the partner of that individual, and them as a couple. So it's a plural you, okay? So just a couple things. Couple things here. Meet Mary and John, all right? Now, we're going to mostly be using examples of Mary and John or those kind of things because I can't talk about actual clients. So they're made up couple. But another thing is you're going to notice is that most of the conversation is going to be about Mary is the one, the partner, and John is the one with the addiction. That is true for a lot of our statistics in our clinic, but it's actually not true for the statistics culturally speaking. There are a lot more women struggling with sexual addiction, pornography use, and so on than people would imagine. But for the most part, they don't come forward to therapy as often as the men do for the sexual or pornography addiction. And more often than not, when a female is or a woman is caught looking at pornography and that kind of thing, it's more or less ignored. Whereas often when a man is discovered doing it, the wife is bringing them to therapy. So we have a biased sampling at Whitestone Clinic because a lot of our clients coming in are what we call wife mandated clients, right? They're brought in because they have to, because they've upset their wife. But that doesn't mean that that's the case for everybody. There will be some people in the situation where it's reversed. It's the other way. But for the most part in our presentation today, we're going to talk more of Mary as the partner and John as the one with the addiction. A couple of things here. We're going to talk about the hero's journey a lot. And I want to emphasize that because what you're going to do is if you're going to look at these issues as serious as they are with pornography and sexual addiction behaviors, as well as the trauma that a partner goes through and the terrible trial it has on a couple, then you are going to be a hero. Because to be honest, heroes are ordinary people who face and overcome extraordinary challenges. And this is an extraordinary challenge. We at the Whitestone Clinic, we see people as the heroes themselves. We're not heroes here. We're guides. We'll get into that later. But I also want to emphasize the couple as a hero, because too often you're going to see an emphasis on, the person who overcame an addiction or the partner who overcame her trauma. And that is heroic. We're going to get into that. But the couple itself is also a hero, because your relationship is potentially going to overcome its toughest journey yet. In therapy, we're going to emphasize this a lot for you guys. Therapy is a way to look into the darkness, into the shadows, into the parts of yourself you'd rather not look at. And sometimes it takes an external event, being found out in a secretive behavior, to force looking inward. But therapy helps you look inward so you can change your outward reality. And if you don't look in the darkness or the shadows within, if you don't pay attention to that, you're going to be letting it dictate how you perceive the world. And the energy it takes to keep that shadow hidden is so exhausting that really therapy can help you find the relief from having to carry that burden all the time and bring you to that new freedom. So we'll talk a bit about that as well. So what is therapy? Well, therapists, anyway, we are guides for the journey. Therapists can aid you, help you, assist you, walk with you in a sense, but we don't make anything happen. The real action is you, the client, the person who's on the journey, that actually makes the change happen. Therapists are there as a supply chain, a support network, an ability to guide and help. But the real action takes place with the actual client. One thing I really want to emphasize for you guys, you need to follow a plan. This is not something that you can just do willy-nilly, go when you feel like it or when you can. You have to dedicate a real number of resources like time and money and so forth to be able to make a journey happen. And so what I'm going to present to you in this is an ideal. It's not perfect, but it's an ideal of how you might plan for you if you're in this situation to work yourself through change and to work yourself through healing. Okay. So just keep in mind, the therapy doesn't do it for you. The therapy provides the support around you as you do it finally for yourself. Couple things though, if we have a hero, we got an enemy, right? So know thy enemy. The enemy, for most people, when they come in, they present it as the person with the addiction. They'd say the addict is the enemy. If he didn't do such and such, we wouldn't be having any problems, or this wouldn't be happening, and so on. There's some truth to that. But in truth, the enemy is not the addicted person. We might say maybe the enemy is the addicted behaviors. Okay, so the behaviors are the enemy. That's kind of more true, but it's actually not the whole story. Maybe the enemy then is the wounds we carry in ourselves. That's a bit more true as well. It's the clash of those wounds on each other that often are the enemy. So something to consider, there's levels to this issue. The enemy ultimately is an intimacy disorder. Some call it intimacy anorexia. We heard that in our last or 2 presentations ago. But intimacy disorder is a great way to put it, because sometimes when people say sex addiction, they don't quite understand what does that mean. Does it mean that they like child pornography? Does it mean that, they sleep with prostitutes or whatever? Like, people don't understand what that means. So, but when you say it's an intimacy disorder, it makes more sense, because you understand that there's something disordered in the way that they're not intimate, in the way that they are closed off from full disclosure, full honesty, and so on. And so we really have to look at this as an intimacy disorder. Another area that's really a part of the enemy is dishonesty. And I'm going to get into that more later, but dishonesty with self really ends up being dishonesty with your spouse, with your partner. So dishonesty with self is we're going to see in a while why that happens more than you think. But if without honesty, you're not going to have healing. And again, like I said last slide, if you haven't faced your past wounds, it means that those wounds will dictate your interpretations of the present. So what is therapy? Therapy is not about going into the past and living in the past. There's nothing really to do with the past. It has to do with understanding how the past has formed your thinking. And therefore, if you can deal with the way you're thinking, deal with the way the past has influenced you, you can make changes for today. And those changes for today are going to bring you that new freedom. It's going to change your reality. That's the point of therapy. A very important point here, the spouse is not to blame. I hope you really hear this. It's not the traumatized partner's fault that this has happened. I might have talked about there's a clash of individual wounds, and yes, that's all part of every couple, but that no way says that the partner is the blame for what happened. Often what you're going to see is a partner will say something like, I'm not whatever enough. If only I was more of this or that, maybe he wouldn't have done that, and so on. Maybe if we've given more sex, maybe, those kind of things. I can tell you guaranteed from seeing thousands of people that it's not about the partner. It's about something broken within the psyche of the person with the addiction. And I've seen married men with very beautiful wives who just will not be intimate with them. And I've seen it with people who are, having lots of sex in their relationship, but still go and look at pornography or do other sexual secret behaviors. So it is not the spouse. It is not the spouse to blame. You're not the cause, though sometimes, and we see this, the person with the addiction will blame as a defense mechanism, will blame the partner and say, it is because of lack of sex or this or that. I'm going to tell you right now, it's never the case. It's an excuse, but it's not the reason. I will give also a warning, however, and this is why at the Whitestone Clinic we work with partners a lot, because often they're the forgotten person. The focus can get so much on getting an addicted person to recover that you can forget the partner. But here, I have to say, partners, watch out for yourselves. Because when you are devastated with a discovery, with the news of the secret sexual behaviors, you will sometimes cope unhealthily. Sometimes it ends up being sexual itself. Sometimes it ends up being alcohol or eating or some other form of coping and soothing. Often it's heightened anxiety, and it's a form of kind of monitoring or policing everything that keeps you so on edge that it just keeps repeating the unhealthy coping behaviors just to bring you down. So you need to watch out for any signs of these things and bring that to therapy, because you need healing in those areas as well, potentially. This little slide here is about lies that addicted persons tell themselves, their traumatized partners, and others. So what is this about? Well, the main thing that you want to realize here is that people who have addictions are really in survival mode. They're in survival mode in the sense of their brain has always been wired to sort of think it's all or nothing. I need this. This has to happen. Those kind of behaviors. And when that happens, they literally perceive that next secret sexual behavior as the same as a starving person looking at food, or a person dying of thirst looking at water. It's totally wrong, but that's how their brain perceives it. So to make up for the incongruence between that type of survival mode and then having to carry on a normal exterior relationship with others, there has to be this dichotomized thinking, right? This sort of not looking at certain things in themselves in order to keep up appearances. I just want to make clear, that doesn't mean the good things that you see in an addicted person are not true. Okay, a lot of that is their best behavior and things about themselves, which is true. But what's unhealthy is that it's separated from the wounded self and the parts of them that are not like appealing, and they don't want that to be seen. So what they'll do is they'll you'll see this especially in religious communities quite a lot. They'll hyper perform in spiritual things, and then they will build up a kind of like resentment towards being good all the time, or a type of entitlement to getting a break. And so in the shadow side, they escape into a secret behavior. Why is it secret? Because they don't want to get caught, right? It will be incongruent with the public image to also be that person who's, say, looking at porn or doing some other secret sexual behavior. So they have to keep it separate. But what happens is that becomes a form of self-deceit. And a person with addiction can be a very good liar. And you know why? Because they practice every day lying to themselves. Because they're good every day at lying to themselves, when they present it to their partner, to other people, it doesn't come off with a lot of tells or signs. It's very convincing. In fact, sometimes we've seen it where the person with the addiction is so convinced by their lies, it starts to become their truth. And only faced with exterior facts, with exterior confrontations, does it become clear to them that they've been self-deceiving. And so a really important part of this is that people would recognize that self-deceit is the cause behind the lying to others, and lying to their spouse. Now, the last point here is on holding space. Until a person with addiction can get rid of the acting out on that addiction and replace it with a healthier coping mechanism, they're not able to really feel their own feelings, to feel their full emotions. That means you, as a partner who is coming in to try to get to be comforted or to have your feelings heard, can't have them heard, because their capacity is narrowed. And so they're already filled up with whatever they have. They have no room left to kind of fill up with what you want them to hold with you. So holding space becomes a sort of a term that we use a lot, especially with addicted persons, to help them to really pay attention to the traumatized partner and allow them to be able to express themselves without shutting them down. Here's a little map, a train or a metro or subway, that kind of thing. You can take a look at that. This makes more sense from the Whitestone Clinic because we use this map in stages of stops along this train track, if you will, that are stages that people go through. But it works for what we're going to share here, because I just want to point out, you have the beginning process, which is involved with discovery and reaching out, and then the intake process and assessments and things you would probably have to go through with any therapist. Basically, they're looking at what wounds are you bringing in and what resources are you bringing in, and then how do we make a plan for you that's going to fit with your needs. Going into that, you're going to see there are 3 different tracks, really. The top track here is for addiction recovery. These are stages that a person with addiction has to go through. We're going to get in that later in the hero's journey for the person with addiction. Down below, you have the purple track, and that is for partners who are needing to go through a trauma recovery. Now, just a caveat here, partners have very different reactions, okay? There's no one kind of addiction. There's really no one kind of trauma partner. You have some people who are traumatized at looking at videos of women in bikinis, and you have women who are traumatized, are not traumatized, sorry, finding out that their partner slept with a prostitute. There's no explaining that. There's just different minds with different capacities or different ways of looking at shocking behavior. But most of the people we see are people who have some level of trauma that's very much like PTSD. The reason is that your investment into this person, your whole, you say a marriage, a relationship, is one where you're not guarding your back. You're giving your trust totally to this person, and then their behaviors has stabbed you in the back. And that is a shocking thing. It does touch your brain in the area of survival. So now your survival system is triggered and you're on guard because you have to watch your own back now while you're still managing everything else in life. And on top of it, you have the grief of everything you just lost. For the person with the addiction, there's sometimes a relief at one stage of finally having the secret out. But now they're feeling the deep shame and impact of having hurt their partner. It's finally caught up with them. The dichotomy has come together and it's caught up with them that they've done this damage. And it's really hard for them to even live with themselves at that point. So it's a very important thing to consider that you need your individual track, and then as a couple, you need to walk through certain stages or things together. A couple things I want to make sure that I mention here. Moving through the system is really a way to help the couple discern how a relationship is still possible. The old relationship is done. And I know this sounds like drastic, but it's sometimes important to put it in this term. The relationship as it was not fully real, and it is now dead. However, there is something there that was good in itself, and that is still good, and there is new good possible, so that a new relationship can be built. And so a couple going through the system needs to find out, how is a relationship possible? Sometimes that relationship does turn out for some people to only be co-parents. In other words, they do choose to not continue to live together. A lot of the cases we have are people who actually find a new way to live together, and they're able to actually have more authentic intimacy. Authentic because the real shadow side is known, and yet it's now they're really having the most real relationship they've ever had. But you cannot run with one broken leg, let alone two. So each partner still needs to do their individual work. Just another way to visualize this, because I'm very visual. You'll see down here, phase one at the bottom. The emphasis is on the beginning. You need some individual work. You might be beginning group work and some couple work, which is basically communication. You can't go deep into couple therapy. Please, I want to emphasize this for people, especially if you're therapists out there, but couple therapy works when the trauma reactions have been brought down and the addiction is not being acted on. So you need sobriety and resiliency recovery on both sides for the openness to be there for couple therapy to actually take effect. So early couple therapy is very ineffective. And we get a lot of people at our clinic, we call them therapy refugees, because they've done a lot of couple work, got nowhere, and then they've come into our process. And that's just because you're putting the cart before the horse. You need to work on certain things to create safety in order for couple therapy to go somewhere. So you'll see these phases where gradually, in the second phase, group is the dominant phase, but there's more couple therapy. There's still a lot of individual therapy. Then individual therapy is getting a little bit less, and there's more emphasis still on group and on couples. And then basically you have a maintenance group and a maintenance individual sessions, but almost all emphasis is on you as a couple. So that would be another way to look at it. If you're planning something out like this, you need to think in stages like this to get you across the finish line, okay? This is just a little note about group therapy. So the importance about group therapy is it's different than just seeing a therapist. If you have the ability to do group therapy, sometimes you can't. Sometimes it might just be like S-Anon or SA or SAA or one of those type of 12-step groups, or Celebrate Recovery or something like that. What you're doing is you're involving yourself with other people who are co-journeying with you. They get it. They are going through the same struggles. They're having the same pain. They might be particularly different in the way that they've been cheated on or hurt or acted out, but they get it, and that support means something. Group therapy is a little different because you have a facilitator who's assisting you to push you towards openness, to push you towards sharing more, to challenge you sometimes if you know you're hiding things from the group and so on. Group therapy can assist you to open up, and basically it's a place for you to practice your intimacy so that you can bring those skills back to your couple relationship and practice with your partner. So I really believe in group therapy, and it's a major part of everything we do here at Whitestone Clinic. This is the hero's journey for people with sex addiction. That includes pornography and a number of other behaviors. The first panel of things are basically what you would see in the first workbook that we use, and that is basically building sobriety. You need to build sobriety. You cannot get to recovery if you don't know sobriety. What's the difference? Sobriety is not doing the bad things anymore. Recovery, however, is different. That's the second panel. Recovery is, go backwards. Recovery is your ability to know your feelings and deal with them healthily. Recovery is knowing your identity and living in your recovered identity. So it was covered up, but now you've recovered it, you found it, and now you're living out your true identity. So recovery becomes possible. And then the last panel here is family, couple and family issues, repairing the coupleship, repairing other family relationships. That becomes the third panel. So this is, I can't go through all 30 tasks with you, but this is the task that we use as a guide on the journey of the person with addiction working towards healing and recovery. On this page here, we have the partner as hero. The partner is hero because she's, Kabihi, is traveling through various stages of discovery. There's a trauma, like I said, that they have to deal with. There's a crisis they have to deal with. There's the emotional aftershock. Like there's a huge amount of numbness that can hit a partner. And when it starts to fade away, the anger and the shame and the other feelings that can hit them is so strong that they feel overwhelmed. And so we need to give skills towards managing that, because it's not normal management of a person's emotions from day to day. It's management of emotions in a crisis where you feel your relationship could be over, where everything starts over. That type of feeling is life or death in your brain. Okay. We also understand addiction better. So understanding the addiction better helps you cope better with what's going on. And then here also communicating your feelings. Now, a lot of partners say, I communicate my feelings fine, it's all the other person. That may be true, but there are ways we can still learn to communicate our feelings differently that actually might be more effective in your particular coupleship. That maybe they would work with a friend, but they don't work with a spouse, and that kind of thing. So there's ways to still communicate our feelings differently, to make empowered choices, so that really is no longer trying to keep all the pieces together, but rather building something new, moving in a new direction, and also reclaiming sexuality. It's terrible how negatively how the impact is so negative on a partner's sexuality when they've discovered secret sexual behaviors of their partner. So they need to reclaim their sexuality and basically sometimes even discover it anew. And finally, there's making choices, taking steps. What are the next steps, things that need to be accomplished? So it becomes a mission. It isn't simply just a way to play defense. You actually go on offense and you work towards something. Like I said in this presentation, there's also the couple. The couple itself is a hero, okay, as a relationship. They go through stages. So they've gone through discovery, there's reaching out, there's the intake assessments, beginning therapy, there's working on couple communication. Now the 90 days reboot, that's a bit controversial. I'll say something briefly about that, but what we do often is challenge a couple to do 90 days without genital expression to their love, that the person with the addiction also is doing no self-stimulation at all, and they're not looking at pornography or anything like that. And they basically give your mind it's like a fasting, a reboot before reintroducing healthy sexuality. So that's sometimes often a part of a couple's journey. Partners don't like this part. They feel, why should I be punished when it's not me that, has done this thing. But if it was alcohol, and for a while you couldn't have alcohol in the house, while your partner was going through a sobriety streak, I think you'd give up alcohol for that little bit of time. So it's also necessary for the partner to participate in this. We also, like I said, there's that module in between on the train track there, but disclosure, impact, restitution. This is all a way of bringing healing to the past wounds. Disclosure is when the person with addiction comes completely clean with everything that was hidden. It doesn't mean to give graphic details, but it does mean to be honest with the number and kind of the behaviors that they were doing. The impact is that the partner would write an impact letter. This is how the addiction has impacted me. And then the person with the addiction can hold that space. Remember, we talked about the holding space. Now they can hold it. And then restitution is a form of moving forward. Intimacy anew is the biggest part. Intimacy might never have truly existed in the relationship. Now, having gone through this process, intimacy is actually possible. So there were proximates to intimacy before, but now this is a new level of intimacy. Okay. So I just want to make another point on that. You guys, if you want to do this work, and this is hard work, you have to remember the goal. You have to remember that at the end of this travel, there is something worth traveling to. And we see that with the traumatized partner and the addicted partner, that they've each gone through their individual journey, and they've dealt with their psyche, with their mind. They've dealt with their past and how it influences their mind and their decisions. But the couple now is going through its healing moments, like I just mentioned, and their therapy is going to be focused on them as a couple. So as a couple, I was originally trained as a couple therapist. As a couple therapist, when you look at the two people in front of you on screen or in the room, and you see them, your actual client is the space between them. It's the relationship they have, not the man nor the woman. Neither of them are actually the client. The relationship is the client. And so what I want to make that point here is that you've done individual work on both sides, but you have to both be sacrificing to give emphasis to you as a couple at the latter stage, okay? Not at the beginning stage. That's most people's mistake. They try to fix the relationship at the beginning stage without the right equipment because they're broken. They're broken from the impact of addiction, and they simply can't do it. But at the latter stage, now they can do it, and that's the emphasis. So how do we bring this all together? Okay, so Mary and John, they travel through this pathway. What's happening along the way? Mary's discovering that she's not alone in her struggles, that statistically speaking out there are probably close to half the population that are dealing with, their partner being sexually secret. Not that they're all addicts, mind you, but just that exists, infidelities and things like that. She discovers she's not alone because the 5 or 10% of the population are going through exactly what she's going through, and that their partner is an addict, and that has a particular impact on your brain and how you think and how you function. She also has people she can lean on and start to share with, so she's not alone in her struggle anymore, and that group becomes a support for her. An individual therapist helps her to learn her empowerment and her own ability to distinguish herself from the behaviors that her partner was doing. And she travels towards this independence that ironically makes her more of a partner because it brings her back into the relationship from a healthy stance. And now let's think of John. John's going through this thing. He's full of shame. He's gotten caught. He might still be in denial. He's working out how to manage going to therapy when he really is the last thing on earth he ever wants to talk about is his sex life or his pornography use. And he gets to see other men or other people going through the same thing and realize, like, okay, sounds embarrassing, but this is not unique to me. Other people have this problem. I'm not alone in this. And in fact, I might not be doing what that guy over there is doing, but we both do the things we do for the same reasons. You both have similar hurts or pains that we're running away from, and they start to kind of team up and feel like brother in arms, and they're able to work on their issues and finally get through the shame, through the things that were hindering John. So then John says, all right, I'm here now. I finally got to a place. Every time I tried to stop in the past, I couldn't stop my behavior. But I finally got to a spot, 30, 60, 90 days, not doing this behavior anymore. And now I'm discovering all these feelings coming up, things I had never felt before, things that were stuffed down. And I start to realize that life is more than what I was thinking it was. And I can express myself more, and I can get tapped into myself and share that with my wife and my other people. And that kind of experience starts to grow for him. And then, you know, John and Mary together are realizing that they're two very different people. You know, maybe John and Mary decide that they actually aren't going to be able to make it. That can happen. At our clinic, it's over 90% of people stay together, but I'm going to say that's a biased sample because people usually come in with that intention in the first place. And the people who discovered the secret sexual behavior and got an immediate divorce, they never called on us. So they're kind of excised from the sample, right? But a lot of the people that come here work it out, but they are not the same couple. They have changed as individuals, and they have changed in their relationship. So John and Mary are no longer the old John and Mary. They're a new type of John and Mary. And that takes a while to develop, but that can happen. So the thing about this therapeutic journey that I hope you guys pick up on today is just the realization that it takes a lot of effort moving in a planned direction with guidance and professional help of people who know what they're doing to get you out of a mess that you got into because you weren't going on a plan and you weren't working with people who can help you out of the problems. And now you are. So therapy is your way, or a way, for you to manage through a crisis, but also to build a new understanding of yourself, your partner, and your marriage. And that's what from a therapist point of view, is the best thing that we love to do, is to help people find that journey, find that hero within, and help them to actualize that hero without. So with that being said, I'm wrapping up here just to let you know that there are various forms of therapy out there. What you probably want to do is, if you're working on this very specific issue, is you want to make sure that the people that you're going to have some kind of training in that area, okay? Most therapy is online today because of COVID and all that kind of thing. But there might be some people in your area that you can see locally. You can look them up and interview them. One thing as a client that you have to understand, because a lot of people don't understand therapy, you're the boss. You go in and you interview the therapist and you ask the therapist how they can serve you. You don't just simply lay down and say, please fix me. You actually are hiring them. So if you were hiring someone to remodel your kitchen, you don't just pick someone off the street. You make sure you get somebody who knows how to remodel kitchens. You get their assistance. So you're hiring somebody. You need to interview them and figure out if they're the right fit for you. A second thing is, it's not wasted money to meet with somebody once or twice and realize it's not for you. Not that therapy's not for you, but that person, that fit may not be for you. So you can just simply say, oh, sorry, this is what I was expecting from therapy. This is not what I'm getting. I'm going to try somebody else. Don't worry about hurting a therapist's feelings. If their feelings are hurt, they're not a very good therapist. Okay? They're making it about themselves, not about you. So if you are going to try therapy, then try a person out for 1, 2, maybe 3 sessions, but you usually know by the second session. And if it's not going to work out for you on a feeling level, a personal level, just fire that therapist, pick somebody else. Okay. The last point is, what I showed you here is what Whitestone Clinic does. It's sort of proprietary. It's sort of our unique approach. But to replicate it in other areas, you're going to have to hire therapists to get them to talk to each other. So if you're going to hire, you're not doing something with like a Whitestone Clinic or the like, then you want to hire a therapist say for the partner, hire a therapist for the person with the addiction, and then maybe down the road, a couple therapists, but you have to get your two therapists to want to talk to each other. That would be an important part of your process for healing, okay? And you have to make sure that they're using the same roadmap, because if one person's kind of working on one type of theory or approach and the other one's doing a different one, you're not following the same map. You're not going to end up in the same part of the continent. All right. So just these are just practical things. I'll probably give you more on the questions and answers, but that's just the last part. If you're going to do a therapeutic journey, consider these practical things. All right. And that's it for now.
Great, thank you, Michael.
Mhm.
That's great. If you can just stop your PowerPoint and then we can
Yes.
be on a side-by-side screen, that would be great. Good. Well, we've had some good questions. You've given us a good roadmap to follow, and we really appreciate that. One of the questions that has come is, what if a spouse is resistant to going? Like, okay, one spouse says, yeah, we need help and I want to have a healthy relationship, and the other spouse goes, not so sure about this.
Right. Well, that's a good question. So a thing to consider is you need to do what you need to do, even if the other person's not willing. And it's interesting because we use a lot of attachment theory. Attachment theory is, in very short terms, is there's a part of our brain, the way our system works, that we read into a relationship survival. Okay. So in a couple relationship, there might be one person who's more anxious and the other person who's more avoidant. And so the anxious person wants to solve something right away, and the avoidant says, not now, not ever. But if you move the other direction, the anxious person starts to pull away, the avoidant will make attempts to try to bring them back in. So the best approach then, as using that as an example, is you go to therapy anyway. You say, I'm going to a therapist, I'm going to be talking about our problems. I'm going to be talking about what I need to do to change. You're going to witness changes in my life, and then you're going to have to deal with that. And then what will usually happen is the other person will go, wait a minute, they're escaping me. They're moving away from me. I'm losing them. And they will make attempts to actually go to therapy themselves. Okay, so it does happen. Like the ideal model I showed you guys here today assumes people start at the same time, but a lot of our clients don't, right? A lot of our clients, the person with addiction's in there, and then like months later, the partner says, hey, why am I spending all the money on his recovery when I need help? And they start their journey. So it doesn't always happen that way. But that's my recommendation. If the other person won't go, you go without them and watch. Usually they'll want to catch up.
Oh, interesting. That's good. I love how you put together almost like, don't shove it down their throat.
Mhm.
Go get some help. And as they see those changes, they'll go, oh, maybe I need to see that what that's all about. Another question is, how can the addicted partner and their partner, how can that couple, when they're in the middle of that and they're on that journey of healing, how can they tell if they're experiencing authentic intimacy or not?
Well, again, there's always been some level of intimacy. Like not everything was fake, and I know that feels that way after a discovery. But what you're discovering is, you know, when somebody's been vulnerable with you. There's a different demeanor, there's a different look in their eyes, there's different content of what they're sharing, right? And when your partner is being more vulnerable with you, you are experiencing more intimacy. So what's the biggest sign? Because a person's, like we talk about going into your cave, you know, like the man goes into his cave deep inside and he finds out there's a dragon there, but there's also a lot of treasure. And I'm going to have to fight the dragon to get the treasure. But they come back out and they say, hey, I discovered this about myself. Well, that's intimacy, right? There's a corny joke. I hate using it, but I will. It's into me see, right? You see into me see. If you're starting to share things from your inner world that the person has never known about you before, or sometimes you knew it, but they didn't know it about themselves and now they're sharing it with you. Well, that's intimacy. And you're gonna witness that, you're gonna experience that. That's how you know you're getting deeper.
Okay, good. All right. So what happens if there's relapse? How
There,
do you handle
there, there is often relapse. Keep in mind that it's not the same as alcohol or certain kind of things. And even there's relapse, right? But with alcohol or those kind of things, you can stay away from the bottle. Okay. You can make sure you don't have liquor in the house, but you can't make sure you don't have sexuality in your body. Like that's with you everywhere you go. It's like an alcoholic, it has to carry a bottle. So you have to learn how to not drink certain out of one bottle, right? So there's often slips or relapses. My definition of that as a slip is when you cross the line, okay? Um, and so it's like they looked at porn that night and it's okay, I crossed the line. A relapse is I didn't tell anybody and I did it again the next day and I did it again the next day. Like I multiplied it, I made it a relapse. So I would prefer that people would work towards not having any slips, but if they're going to have any, have slips and not relapses.
Hmm.
And that's a sign of progress.
And so in that, are you saying that, okay, in the slip that you're willing to say the next day, hey, I stayed up late and I told you I was really working, but I wasn't, I was watching.
Correct. So listen, for partners, there's two levels of trauma. There's the sexual behavior itself, which is sometimes shocking in its own right, and that they're traumatized that happened. But they're often more traumatized that it was kept secret.
Sure.
So the secret behavior is already eliminated if the same day or the next day the person said, last night I had a slip, because then now it's not a secret. You see how that, so you still violated one level because it was a sexual behavior outside the lines, but you didn't violate on the other level, which is keeping it secret. And so even that actually has helped couples grow in intimacy. Not that you should do that, but that it can happen, that you can grow in intimacy because now you see vulnerability. It takes a lot for a person with addiction to come and say, I really messed up. That's huge because the whole life has been pretend you didn't.
Hmm.
So that's movement towards intimacy, even though it hurts for the partner to know, oh, you looked at women or whatever on the computer. That hurts, but thank you for telling me.
Mhm.
And you see that actually work. So slips are part of the healing at the beginning, but it does get to a point when you have a long stretch of sobriety and now you're dealing with real recovery.
Right. Okay, good. So if I understand you correctly, towards the end, you talked about, I love the graph that you showed of what the therapy looks like, with the bars.
Mhm.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying really initially, it's a lot of that individual work and finding help with that each individual and then the coming together. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, at the beginning, you will do some potential communication sessions with a couple therapists to play from the same playbook,
Mhm.
because you're going to have some pretty tense times. You got to learn how to talk to each other, but it's not going to be deep couple therapy because, to be honest, you don't want to be in the room with a couple that's that much at each other, defensively or aggressively, because there's so much pain. You want to get them calmed down first to be more stable is the word, to get them to work on their couple therapy later on. Yeah. So you do
And
a little sprinkle at the beginning, but the emphasis is on the end.
right. And then it's the same therapist that sees you each individually and then works with you as a couple, correct?
Say that again, please.
It's the same therapist that works with the man and then works with the woman and then works together?
No,
Or no?
no, technically no. So for the ethical, like in small towns or places, sometimes you have to do that. But ethically speaking, you would work, like the man would have his own therapist, the woman her own therapist, and they would have a separate couple therapist. The reason is you got to think of the hats that the therapist wears. So if I'm as a couple therapist, I also I do both. I do individual as well, but if I was this couple therapist, but then I saw the man as an addict, I have a bias potential
Oh,
towards the man, right?
mhm.
And if you're in a small town, you might have to see both and them as a couple, but normally that's just not the case. So what we do at the clinic is we have cross client consults, CCCs, and those cross client consults are to get the therapists to talk to each other with permission from the clients,
Mhm.
so that what you learn from one individual file, or when they're in group, that's another one, helps the other files, helps you understand. So the couple therapist, for instance, would know a lot more than a typical couple therapist, because they're getting information from the individual therapists and the group moderators. That's our model. But I'm just saying, like, they're like, you need to have them separate, but they need to communicate if you're going to have a more ideal outcome.
Sure. So in reality, you're actually working with 3 different therapists that have
Yeah.
the same end goal in sight. So yeah, so that may seem a little overwhelming if I'm sitting here going, yeah, I need help. Now I gotta find 3 people. Like, oh
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
goodness.
I
That
think
seems
you
a bit
start
much.
somewhere, right? You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And like we do plans, like sometimes we have certain churches that help supplement people's therapy. We have finance programs where you kind of like, people take out a student loan type of thing, but they take out a therapy loan. We actually have a program for that.
Okay.
But you really have to think about it this way. Some people that come into our clinic they score on, there's a test we give them, and out of 0 to 20, they'll fit into an addicted or non-addicted population. And most of our clients are 6 or above, often 10 or above, but a lot can score near 16 or 17 out of 20. And those people are technically supposed to go to residential treatment. Okay, so they come in and you're saying, I'm sorry, but your scores and these different tests we give you say you should go away for 3 weeks to 3 months and live at a residence and do full-time therapy because you're that serious. Well, that's going to cost in the tens of thousands of dollars, right? So we do an outpatient system where you come once a week to a group therapy, about once or twice a month to your individual therapist, and once a month to your couple therapist. And it is more expensive than, what you would ordinarily do, but it's got a plan and a program so that over maybe a year and a half or something like that, you're getting a lot more done than you would even 3 weeks in intensive rehab. So it's meant to be spread out and actually actualized over a longer period to make the traction happen, right? To get it to stick,
Sure. Sure.
right?
Well, yeah, that's good. Thanks for the clarification on that. And I think, the investment in a relationship really, isn't it worth that financial, yeah.
We're still cheaper than lawyers, I
Yeah.
just have to say.
And just for what that looks like in the years and years ahead, if you're married for 70 years, don't you want to have more of those being amazing years than rotten years? And so you say, I
Right.
invested a couple of grand or more than a couple of grand to be able to get that help. What's the
Right.
ripple effect really in your relationships, not only with each other, but with your
Right.
children and with your friends? And, it just has
Right.
a ripple effect all the way, because if you're a liar and a deceiver and a good one, you're going to manipulate not only at home, but you're going to do it at work.
Well, I'm going to tell you a few stories, and I'm not going to give names, of course, but we've had people say, I can't invest, or I no longer can invest in this behavior therapy. And then they bought a $20,000 boat, or they went all on vacation to Hawaii, and there's nothing wrong with going on vacation, but I'm just saying it's a choice, right? It's a choice to say, I'm going to spend $8,000 on a trip for 1 week versus I'm going to spend $4,000 this year on my therapy. It's just a way to look at it. So if you're in a crisis situation, it's a tough place to make a decision from, but it's also very awakening, very clear that something needs to be done.
Yeah, good, good. I really liked your comment. I think it was about in the middle of your presentation where, and I've never heard it phrased quite this way, where you said the old relationship is done, it's dead,
Mhm.
and now we need to build the new, real one. Can you unpack that just a little bit more?
Sure. It's not a popular thing. I mean, when I say it, because people they come in with an idea of keeping the vestiges of their relationship, like keeping the relationship alive. But what happens is you need to speak truth into a situation, right? And the reality is that you were only getting a version of the other person, and it could have been decades. It could have been, how long you've been together. You only ever got a version of that person. Doesn't mean it wasn't authentic for the version you got. It just means there's a whole lot of stuff that you weren't getting. And unfortunately, you're getting it in like this massive insert of shock and terrible feelings when you discover all the stuff that was there hidden. But now you can rebuild with that, realizing that, yeah, I know you're not perfect and I'm not perfect. And those are horrible things that you did. And I'm glad that you can own them. Now, how do we have a relationship where I know these things about you? And I know even where they come from because you've done your work. And I can share things about me that you never knew about. Now that I can trust you because you're being vulnerable with me, then the intimacy happens on a level that could never have existed before.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm talking about. The new relationship can be better than the old. That being said, there's trauma cycles and these things can reinsert on a cyclical basis, but you get to deal with those and they go away eventually, right? They tone down. But that's what I mean by it. The relationship is over. And sometimes it's just a great relief to just say it's done. And now it's like, can we build something new or not?
And I would also assume that in relationships with the addicted partner, that the other partner is also has developed maybe coping mechanisms that aren't healthy as well in order just to survive.
It's very, very common. Like it's very sensitive topic. If I was in a room full of people, I might duck when I about to say this, right? But the issue is that there were usually some unhealthy coping mechanisms already arisen in the partner while there was some form of neglect in the relationship anyway, right? So it's not comparable per se, but he went to porn that night and you ate a whole thing of Haagen-Dazs. It's not the same thing. Porn has got a totally different moral element and that kind of stuff. But the reality is you are both unhealthily coping with your loneliness. And so it's really hard for the partners, what we first do is we deal with the crisis and the shock of what they've been going through. And then they get stabilized. They're able to start looking at their own individual coping mechanisms and start to moderate those or deal with those. Just as the addict has to learn how to cope with his behavior, with his emotions, without going to the old behaviors. So they're both kind of doing something similar there, although from different camps, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Very good. We had a question that came up saying, "Hey, I live in Kingston. Where can I get help?" So just your Whitestone Clinic does do virtual therapy.
Yes, we do. We do virtual. Yeah.
And so I'm assuming that if someone reached out, you had your contact information on that last slide, and I think maybe Annie has got it here in the chat as well.
Mm-hmm.
But through your clinic, I'm assuming you have multiple therapists. So someone could come to you and say, okay, we need one for this person, one for this person.
Yes. Yeah.
So you would provide kind of a package.
It's how we're set up, right?
Okay.
And we do monthly. You do a monthly payment and get all the various services for that month type of thing.
Okay.
But basically, we can serve anyone online in Canada except for the provinces that have registered college. So except Ontario, which we're part of, but we can't do usually Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Alberta.
Okay.
Usually. So because they have protected classification for psychotherapy within their province, but everywhere else we can do online. And then for someone like Kingston, we've had many people from that area. So sometimes they've driven up for an intensive or a half day or things like that. But online is so easy to do now that even our groups are all online at this point.
Okay, all right, good. And just audience, so you know, we do have a list of therapists across Canada. So just reach out to defenddignity.ca and we can help you find a therapist or give you at least contact information to start that. And I assume, Michael, if someone reached out to you and said, hey, I live in Alberta and obviously I can't work with you, do you have any recommendations?
Well, I should give you guys a site here. Maybe Annie could type it up, but it's itap.com, IITAP.com, and they have a therapist search directory on there, and that'll get you certified sex addiction therapist. And if you're concerned about faith perspective, like everyone at our clinic, all but one really are all certain kind of faith practice, but the site ITAP will usually say if that person is Christian or faith-centered therapy. So you can kind of screen them out that way. There's a lot in Alberta. There's a
Okay,
lot. Oh yeah.
good. Well, Michael, thank you. We just really appreciate the wealth of knowledge that you've shared with us and just some really good practical helps that people can now take and say, sit down and have that conversation and say, hey, and I think this webinar is great because people have 30 days to access it. So if one partner watched it and say, hey, would you be willing to at least watch this and see if this could work for us? So thank you for taking the time with us this evening. We just really value it. So great.
My pleasure.
All right, thank you. Before the rest of you go, I have just a couple of other comments that I need to make. We do have another poll that we're going to put up that Annie is going to put up for us. And it just helps us to understand how helpful was this webinar to you. And it enables us to be able to discern how to do our sessions and just gives good feedback. So if you could take a moment to fill that in, that would be really great. Great, thanks for your response. Everybody's doing a great job of responding to that. Great, thank you very much for doing that. So we talked about if you need professional help, Annie's put some stuff in the chat box there, but Michael's also given some really good suggestions as well. So make sure to take advantage of that. We have 2 action steps that we would love for you to be engaged in if possible. The first one is Senator Julie Meville-Deschênes from Montreal has proposed Bill S-203, which would create meaningful age verification in Canada. Basically, this legislation makes it an offense to make sexually explicit material available to young people on the internet. And it also enables the Minister of Public Safety to require that steps are taken by internet service providers to prevent sexual explicit material from being made available to young people on the internet. If this bill was passed, there would be meaningful age verification in Canada. No one under 18 years of age would be able to intentionally or accidentally stumble on pornographic material. So we have a letter on our Defend Dignity page that if you can go there, Annie will have that link posted as well, and you can send a letter to your MP and to your regional senator. And you can add some personal comments if you want to, but it will go directly to them. And that will just raise that groundswell support so our parliamentarians know that, yeah, the citizens of Canada do care about this. And yeah, we do want age verification. The second action is if you would join us in asking Snapchat to put better protections in place while children are using their app. There are over 8 million Snapchat users in Canada alone. 90% of those users are 13 to 24 years old. And the vast majority, of course, are on Snapchat a couple of times a day. So what are the issues? What are we concerned about with Snapchat? Well, Snapchat includes easy exposure to pornography. It is being the ease of being lured by sexual predators. It creates self-made child pornography by Snapchat sexting and cyberbullying. So there's a recent story from Edmonton. Annie has that in the chat bar as well. And there's a link where a predator befriended an 11-year-old through Snapchat. And so he set up a meeting and then sexually assaulted her. We've seen the Canadian executives, we've sent the Canadian executives of Snapchat a registered letter, but they haven't responded. So we need your public pressure for them to consider those requests. So you can go to choosechange.org, that's choosechange.org. And when you click Snapchat, you'll be taken to a pre-written email. It's up there on the screen right now. And you can add your own comments to this letter or send it just as is. Fill in your name, your address, and email and hit send. If you have a Twitter account, and if you would, we would strongly encourage you to tweet. Tweeting is something that Snapchat watches very closely to see what's the general public saying, and has been a major factor in victories in the past in wanting to see companies make a change. So if you use the Snapchat, if you use the Twitter link that we have on our page, then our advocacy software will ask access to your account to send that tweet, or just you can use your Twitter account and tweet yourself. So those are just two great ways that you can make an impact, and they only each take about 5 minutes, and they can make a huge difference, so that Snapchat and parliamentarians know this is the changes that we would like to see and the safety we would like to see for our children. Thanks for participating tonight. We have just really valued your presence with us. Watch for upcoming events in the new year. In May of 2021, we're putting on Canadian Sexual Exploitation Summit. It's a conference that addresses the demand side of porn. We've got some amazing presenters already lined up for that, so you can register for that on our defenddignity.ca webpage. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email us. We would love to hear from you. Thank you for being with us this evening.